Hello, so today I'm going to be reading the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats, of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants, with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you with an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and sang that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time, for the yellow smoke that slides along the streets, rubbing its back upon the window panes, there will be time, to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me. And time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions. Before the taking of the toast and tea, in the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to fall back and descend the stair, with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but ascertained by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a time will reverse. For I have known them all already, have known them evenings, mornings, and afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall, beneath the music from a farther room, so how should I presume? And I know them all, and I know the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am pen and wriggling on the wall. Then how should I begin? To spit it out all the buttons of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted, white and bare, but in the lamplight, down with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that light along a table or wrap around a shawl. And then, should I presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say I have gone at the dusk that narrow streets, and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirtless sleeves, leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws, scuttling across the floors of silent seas. In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I've wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I've seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it after all? After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, Come back to tell you, I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It is impossible to say what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile? If one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl, and turning towards the window should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not what I meant at all. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am attendant lord, one that will do, to swell a progress, start a scene or two. Advise the prince, withal an easy tool, differential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. At times, indeed, almost ridiculous, at times, almost a fool. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. So, this was my second time reading this poem, and I have my notes here if I keep looking down. But this was my second time reading the poem, and I find T.S. Eliot's poetry sometimes a little bit difficult to read. Earlier this year I read The Wasteland, and I found that was really difficult. So because I read this in high school, I wanted to come back and see if I could understand it a little bit better now that I'm older and have more experience analyzing stories and poetry. So something that I found that was really interesting is that there's a piece that I didn't read. It's in French, I believe, and it is from Dante's Inferno, and basically the character is talking to Dante because he is in hell and he doesn't think that he will get out. And I think that that's really interesting because I feel like that Prufrock is maybe talking to this person because maybe he feels that he's close to death and close to the end of his life, and he just wants someone to vent to and just someone to just share all of his emotions that he's been feeling his whole life. So this poem to me is just about a man that is examining his mind. We're going into all of his insecurities that he feels. So I think that's basically what this poem is about. To me, Prufrock is very insecure. For example, in line 40, he talks about the bald spot on his head and how he's worried to go up the stairs because he's afraid that people will look at the bald spot on his head and how his hair is growing thin. So I think that he is very insecure. I think he's very pessimistic. He has this very depressed, sad view of things. And I also think that he is very shy and very anxious. He says that he feels like the mermaids won't talk to him. He's not very confident in himself. He says he sees the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. And we've seen this in the first time in line 14. So he's just very insecure, very shy. He's afraid to talk to people. And he also describes himself in line 117 through 119 as politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. So yes, he's very insecure and anxious. The setting of this story is, I imagined that it is Prufrock and this character that we don't know who he is. They are walking at night, probably along this dark path, and he's just talking to him about all of his insecurities and how he feels. Now, I said that I thought that the character was very sad and depressing. I also just feel like that is also the tone of this poem. It's very, like I said, pessimistic, very sad, depressing. So I think the conflict that Prufrock is having is he's having a battle between his heart and his mind. His heart wants him to go out and talk to these people and live his life without worrying about what anyone else thinks, but his mind is very focused on what people will think. Just like the bald spot in his head, just like, do I dare? Like, do I dare talk to these people? Do I dare eat a peach? Like, he's very, just very cautious about what he should do instead of just letting go and just being free. So, like I said, he's addressing a silent listener in this, poem. So for me, this would just be a really good example of a dramatic monologue, because that is a monologue. It's just when you are talking, just you, and you're talking out to the audience or a silent listener. So in this story, there are a lot of repeated lines. Some that I've already touched on, such as, let me get my book, such as line 14, 13 through 14, in the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. So the women are coming in and out of wherever he is, and they're not paying attention to him. They're paying attention to this, something else, just not him. They're not paying attention to him, and so he sees them, and the people don't notice him. He blends in with the crowd. There is also another line, which is in line 39, that I also mentioned, where he says, "Do I dare? Do I dare?" And it's repeated again in line 45. He says, "Do I dare disturb the universe?" Which I thought was interesting to ask, should you disturb the universe? So I feel like he's just very, a very anxious person. There's also another line that is repeated in line 88, and he repeats a lot, "Would it have been worth it after all?" So what I gathered from this, when he says, "Would it have been worth it after all?" I gather that he's asking, would it have been worth it well, I can see this two ways. And I see this as he's saying, would it have been worth it to let all of my fears go, and just live my life without worrying about anyone else and what anyone else will think? Would it have been worth it that way? And I also think of it as he's like, would it have been worth it to change myself? Would I have still been in this exact situation? Would my life have been different? Would it have been worth it after all? So I think that's very important. One of the most important lines throughout the poem is him saying, would it have been worth it after all? So that is something that I found very interesting. I also found something interesting throughout the poem was that the first visual that we see in line 3, he says, like a patient etherized upon a table. Now, obviously, that is an example of a simile. And so in my mind, when I thought of that, I thought of a patient that is just lying on the hospital bed, and he's just like open and like free for everyone to he's just, for everyone to perform surgery on him, and he's just free and open. And I just took that as, Prufrock is talking to this person, and just like that patient, he's laying all of his heart, all of his feelings out for him to listen, similar to like this patient is on this table giving their full consent and permission for this doctor to perform some type of surgery on them. There's also a lot of imagery and visuals to the yellow fog, and very visual images of a cat. It says in line 16, it says, the yellow smoke rubs his muzzle on the window panes, and in line 17, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. So I just got visual imagery of a cat. Also in line 25, rubbing its back upon the window panes. So that also is a visual imagery of a cat. Also just a lot of there's just a lot of there's a food I guess imagery type of sense where he says, do I dare eat a peach? I visualized myself eating a peach when I read that. So there's that. Also, some metaphors I found. He says in line 51, he says, I have measured out my life in coffee spoons. Now, when he says he's measured out his life in coffee spoons, I took that as he already has his life planned out. He's not a very spontaneous person. He also says in line 73, he says, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. So he just wishes that he was a crab that kind of just scurries along the ocean, just I guess not really having a care in the world, like just free, I assume. So some symbolism in this story. So I think the biggest, or one of the biggest symbolisms in this story are the mermaids, and just that's in line 23, where he just says, I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. And that is just that symbolizes something that is unattainable to him. He likes the idea of these mermaids because he doesn't have to talk to them. They're not real women, but they also symbolize something that is unattainable to him because they aren't real. Now, something that I noticed, and I didn't notice this the very first time I read it, but I noticed it now, was in line 85. He says, I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. So I took the eternal footman as a symbol of either God or the devil. And when he says he heard it snicker, and in short, he was afraid, I took that as him he was afraid because he's close to death, and he is afraid of death, and he's afraid of death, and he's also afraid of dying because he hasn't let go of his insecurities and truly just lived his life. So while I was reading this poem, I found that in the beginning of it, it's in present tense because he says, let us go, and then there will be time. And also, so he's saying there will be, but then it switches to past tense, where he says in line 98, would it have been worth it all? So I see this as he's just reflecting on his life as he's walking with this unknown individual. So I found that very, very interesting because that's also something that I didn't, and I don't know how I didn't pick that up, but that is also, when I read it the first time, something that I didn't pick up, that he was just reflecting. I felt that I was able to really visualize him in this person. I visualized myself, him, and me talking, and he's just venting all of his emotions while we're walking down this dark alley at night. And so I think what Elliot, or also before I get to that, I want to mention that he also says that he, in line 111, no, I'm not Prince Hamlet. Obviously Hamlet from Shakespeare. He's saying that he was not meant to be the star. He's meant to be a background character. Sometimes he also says that he, in line 120, at times indeed almost ridiculous, at times almost the fool. So he also feels like he is a fool and not this star character, just someone that just lingers in the background. And so overall, I just think that Elliot is trying to just say that people shouldn't care about small insecurities, and that shouldn't stop them from living their life, because at the end of the day, you don't want to wake up and realize that you're getting older and you haven't lived your life the way that you want to live it because you were afraid of what other people might think, and that will also result in you missing opportunities that could have been really great for you. I chose this poem because it really stuck out to me, and it's really relatable. I think that sometimes I also just am very anxious and always just very worried about what other people will say or think, and sometimes I don't say what I want to say because I am afraid that will upset someone or anything like that. But this is a very interesting poem. It's one of my favorites that I have read this semester because of how relatable it is, and just how I think this is just a wake-up call and a wake-up poem for me to read, to just let things go and just say what's on my mind, without worrying about what other people will think of what I have to say. But this was a really great poem, and I really enjoyed analyzing it, and I hope that you enjoyed my interpretation of it. I know that a lot of people can interpret it any way that they want to, and I am always open to hearing what other people think about this poem, but I had a really good time sharing my thoughts with you, and I hope that you enjoyed my presentation, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye.